Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's Future Flight Coffee Chat. I'm Amanda Brewer, the head of marketing at OneSky and the host for today's event. Before we get started, I have a few housekeeping things that I would like to go over with you. Let's just kind of walk through the Livestorm platform if you're new to it. The first thing we're going to do is talk about the where you can get help if you run into any problems. So there is a help button down at the left-hand side of your panel, of your screen. And if you need to do some sound checks or connectivity checks or dial in from the phone, you can do that. Down at the right-hand side of your panel, you will see a chat panel. You can use this chat panel to chat with any of today's panelists, to chat with myself. If you have questions about OneSky, we also have Alyssa Weber with us, representing the marketing department at Intermap. You can chat with her if you have any questions about Intermap or how they're working with Lufthansa Systems. Next to that, there is a questions tab. If you have any questions, you can ask those to our panelists today throughout the presentation. And then next to that is an apps tab. If you go to that apps tab, you will see a place where you can get handouts and you can download some more information about Intermap and about OneSky as well. Now, before we get started, I'm pleased to introduce to you today our guests from Intermap and Lufthansa Systems. We have with us today Ivan Maddox, Executive VP of Commercial Solutions at Intermap Technologies. Ivan oversees Intermap's commercial and government solutions, finding new ways geospatial intelligence is created and delivered, ensuring the right information is in the hands of planners and operators around the world. He has a BS in surveying, geomatics, engineering from the University of Calgary, and over 25 years of experience in geospatial industry. We also have Fabio Forinal, the product owner of Lido Surface Data at Lufthansa Systems. Fabio is responsible for several data products within Lufthansa Systems that are used in most of the daily commercial flights. He is highly involved in the development and EASA certification of the Surface Data NEXTView. He holds a master's degree in geography from the University of Zurich and has worked for Lufthansa Systems for the past 5 years. Finally, we have Mike Tornetta, the head of sales at OneSky. Mike has over 20 years of experience in business development, sales, and sales management within the software technology-based companies, particularly in the aerospace and aviation industries, and companies like Lockheed Martin and ANSYS government initiatives, formerly Analytical Graphics. At OneSky, Mike supports leading aircraft manufacturers and operators for urban air mobility and advanced air mobility to prepare their systems for BV loss operations. So, Mike, before I hand it over to you, can you tell us a little more about our ecosystem partners, such as Intermap and Lufthansa Systems, and their involvement in the OneSky Future Flight program?
Hey, thanks, Amanda. Yeah, I'd like to explain to everybody how we've kind of evolved the Future of Flight program to include companies like Intermap and Lufthansa Systems. So when we started the Future of Flight program, it was geared solely for OEMs and operators. The goal was to introduce those types of companies to the OneSky solution set and help them understand how OneSky could offer value to their business as it evolves through to full-scale operations. But we understood pretty quickly that OneSky and our airspace solution set was really just one piece of the puzzle. And over time, we've been exposed to a lot of different interesting technologies and companies that were complementary to our solutions. And in our quest to provide the best support to our partners, we began working collaboratively with some of these companies and where it made sense and bringing those technologies to bear. So we expanded the Future of Flight program to now include ecosystem partners as well. This allows us to become trusted advisors in the industry as well as technology vendors. After meeting Ivan and Fabio and their team and learning about NEXTView, which you'll learn a little bit more about here today, it seemed like a no-brainer that we should be working together. Intermap and Lufthansa Systems have created the world's first and only certified global aviation surface data set. And our teams have already started discovering several ways that we can work together and provide additional value through working together to bring more technology to the industry. So in today's coffee chat, we're going to introduce the team and discuss some of those different ways that they can bring value to the industry in combination with OneSky and the things that we provide. So, gentlemen, for those in the audience that may not be familiar with Intermap and Lufthansa Systems, please tell us a little bit about your companies and the work that you do and how the industry can actually benefit from what you're bringing to bear.
Sure. I'll be happy to go first on that, Mike. So yeah, I'm with Intermap. Intermap as a company has been around for a little over, well, almost 25 years, since the mid-90s. If you go way back through our heritage, though, we actually go back over 100 years. And we were one of the first companies that ever put a camera on an aircraft for remote sensing purposes. And we did that kind of around the Philadelphia area. So fast forward to the mid-90s, Intermap was formed in its current incarnation. We've got offices in Denver, Calgary, Prague, and Jakarta. And if you could go to the next slide there, please. And we've really come a long way in the last little while as far as developing three-dimensional technologies. Some of the highlights in the last 25 years would definitely include the work that we did with NASA on the SRTM mission. That's relevant for what we're talking about today, because that was the very first global digital elevation model that was ever produced. It was mapped with the space shuttle. We were a prime contractor on that, so we had a lot to do with producing global elevation data sets from the very first day that they were around. Fast forward to 2020, that's when we were able to launch with our partners over at Lufthansa Systems the certified aviation version of that data set. Obviously, a completely different data set with higher quality that we're going to talk about. And to today, where we're talking about the cutting edge of aviation technologies, particularly UAS and UTM. So we're very excited about that. If you go to the next slide, really Intermap's focus has always been three dimensions. We come from a 2D mapping background, just like most mapping organizations. But when we took possession of some mapping technology in the 90s, we really started to focus on elevations. And over the course of those 25 years, we've been improving and expanding our capabilities to do three-dimensional geospatial mapping. And that's really gotten us to where we are today, not just with aviation, but with other verticals. We work with insurance, we work with telecom, and then also with governments as well. So that's kind of Intermap in a nutshell. If you go to the next slide.
Yes, so hello everyone. So I will shortly take over and give you a really high-level introduction into Lufthansa Systems. Just here, this slide should give you a bit an overview, like which part do we take, like in this whole aviation industry. As you might know, our company exists already since over 20 years, and we always like an important part of the whole like data processing within the aviation industry. And what our role is actually, mainly in the part I'm working on in like providing data solutions, is that each state authority is publishing information about the airspaces, the waypoints, the whole procedures to land and take off from an airport. But they also provide information about the obstacles which could be a danger for aviation industry, terrain data, etc. So that's all officially published data by each country around the world. And what we are doing as Lufthansa System is we really collect this data together from all around the world, and we standardize it into one global database. Because each state authority is publishing it with a bit different quality characteristic, different unit of measurements, and we provide this into one standardized database where we add quality checks and where we also add the EASA certification on top, which is similar to the FAA certification. And this makes just sure that the data didn't change in the whole processing chain. And when our end users receive our data, they can be assured that it's still the same data that was officially published. And what we do then with those global databases, we provide them to airlines. So we have more than 300 airlines as customers, but we also provide it to the major avionics manufacturer. So they then really use this data to integrate it into the cockpit, but it's also used in flight planning systems or flight simulators, etc. And in the last couple of years, we start now also to provide this data more and more into like the newer industries like UTM, UAVs, etc. If you maybe can go to the next slide. One thing we figured out, there's like certified data for navigation data, for obstacles, for aerodrome mapping data, but there was like no certified data available on the market for terrain data. And actually, aviation industry is still mostly focusing on the, let's say, a bit outdated SRTM data. And that's why we actually were looking for a partner to come up with like a higher resolution terrain data to really like help like the industry to move a step forward. And that's where we partnered up with Intermap technologies. So to really they create like the terrain data according to the industry requirements. We take data, make validation, put the certification on top, and together like we provide now this data, Lido Surface Data NEXTView to the market. That's also the data set we joined OneSky, their future flight program, because we really see benefit of this data within the whole UAV sector. And we want to learn from each other, figure out how we can improve this data set so that in the end, it's really like useful for the whole industry. On the next slide, just some high-level specification. I don't need to go to detail, but we really provide a global data set with 5-meter resolution. So we really have like buildings in it, we have trees in it, obstructions. So it really helps you to plan efficient flights and always to know where you are like above the ground. And just 2 more examples on the next 2 slides, how this data set looks like. First example of Mexico City. You can already see a lot of details of terrain, details of buildings around the aerodrome, but also like all the houses and streets, etc., which are part of this data set. And that's what we have really available everywhere around the world in highest quality. And the next slide, just a representation in 3 dimension, the city of Warsaw. You can already see, like the high buildings, etc. And if this is integrated into a UTM, for example, you can really plan the most efficient and most safe route with it. So I hope you get a bit of an overview about Intermap Lufthansa Systems and our product. And I'm looking forward for the discussion now.
Thank you, Fabio. That's a great background that the 2 of you provided. And so I think everybody has a pretty good understanding now of your pedigree in the space of aviation in general. Now I want to kind of pivot more towards the commercial drone world that we all live in now and start peeling that onion back to see what you guys are doing there. So I'm really excited about working with this technology because with our heritage of an analytics-based company, there's lots of ways that I can think of us starting to work together and using the technology. But Ivan, when you and I first started talking and talking about the Future of Flight program, what was it about the program that attracted you? What made you want to be part of it?
Yeah, well, the best thing about the Future of Flight program, as we understand it, is that it's an open forum for sharing information, exactly like what we're doing right now. This industry, this technology is still very early on. It's hard to imagine the places it's going to go, but we're still at kind of very early stage of developing it. And right now, the most important thing is to share information with each other. There's a lot of people in the industry that aren't even aware of what's possible, and being able to sort of create a vision of what can be done with all the different myriad of technologies that are coming into the UTM and UAS space is super important right now, because that's going to be forming the foundation for decisions that really shape the industry for the next couple of decades. Not only that, we're also at an early stage with the regulatory environment. The rules are being devised as we speak, and there's no conclusion yet on what they're going to look like. And the more we're able to share information and ensure everyone is operating in a safe and efficient way, the more likely those regulations are going to be conducive to efficient and profitable operations. Just to use safety as one example, if UAS and UTM can demonstrate an ability to operate safely at this early stage, that's going to create an environment with the regulatory bodies where the safety part is understood already. And the rules that get drawn up are going to be based on the assumption that this technology can be safe. If this was sort of on its head and the industry was sort of making front pages for the wrong reasons, we'd be looking at a regulatory regime where the rules might be a little too stringent to really roll out the technology. So right now, sharing information is key to ensuring a robust industry, and Future of Flight's perfect for that.
Thank you, Ivan. That's an excellent point about the regulatory side of things. Makes me think of, when I think of the fact that your technology is already certified in one corner of the industry, it's being used on the aircraft in the avionics systems. I love the idea that we could potentially combine that at the ground level with a UTM system. So Fabio, when it comes to your high resolution terrain data, from your perspective, what's the biggest value add, or how does it add value to the commercial UAS industry? And how do you currently anticipate working with those types of customers?
Yeah, I think the main difference is when you look at the traditional aviation industry, they were really like on en route, you fly quite far away from any terrain or any buildings. And if you look now into this new upcoming use case in the UAV industry, you really want to go more near to the ground. And that's where exactly you need a high resolution terrain model. So if this, for example, integrate in a UTM or flight planning system, you can really plan the most efficient route from A to B, including any consideration of safety, as you already have the accurate information about potential dangers, potential obstacles, etc. So it's really important that you always know like where an aircraft can fly and where it can't fly, to get out like the efficient route. The same goes into the whole, I think there are regulations coming up like the SORA, like the safety risk evaluation, which you need to perform before each flight. And there you need to take things into consideration like land use, like obstacle avoidance and population, etc. And that's all information which we can offer with our data. Can really give like inputs to get like good decisions out of it. And the aim in the end should always be that you can enter a flight plan into a UTM system, and you get automatically like a safety risk assessment based on accurate data. And all you get out is like a go or no go based on your route, or even actually a more efficient route. So that's really a benefit where I see the high resolution data. And we already have the one or the other customer in this industry. And what we really try is to work close together with them. We come a bit from the traditional industry, but we want to learn from each other. So our product is not, let's say, fully finished. I mean, it's working now, but based on feedback we receive, we actually try to improve it. That's, for example, we now just for one customer integrate like additional airspaces into this one data set to make it more useful for this customer. Or even we plan to like add even higher resolution data next to, for example, vertiports into this Lido Surface Data NEXTView to really have in the end a product which the customer needs. So it's really like we really try to work close together with the industry. It's also a reason we joined OneSky to really learn from each other and improve like together. Yes.
Thank you, Fabio. I'm glad you brought up vertiports too. Ivan, you and I had talked before about infrastructure and some of the concerns or challenges there in the industry itself. And as we know, there's not going to be a ton of airports being used, at least for the smaller drones and doing cargo deliveries, that kind of thing. How critical, in your opinion, is high resolution terrain data when it comes to establishing the needed infrastructure or building out the infrastructure to really support this industry going forward?
Yeah, no, that's a really important piece of it. One of our sort of busiest use cases here in the last few years, especially during the pandemic, has been helping companies build out infrastructure in order to support their UAS. Africa's kind of been at the forefront of this, where different companies have been actually planning entire supply chains based on UAS, where they can make deliveries to remote locations. And they've been using NEXTView not only to make the flight plans as efficient and as safe as possible, but actually planning where to put their launch sites and the warehouses that support them. And then as well to plan exactly where the deliveries can be made so that there's a safe approach for the aircraft, where they can drop the cargo and return safely and with plenty of power back to the launch pad. So just creating that backbone of a new supply chain from scratch is sort of a fundamental use case that we've really seen a lot of in the last few years. And we're beginning to see that use case in more advanced countries like North America and Europe, not just in Africa anymore.
Okay, very good. Another question for you, Ivan. When we first met and first started talking, and I told you a little bit about OneSky and what it does, and you explained, your company and your technology, you thought, or you expanded on the fact that there's a very unique and distinct value prop for working with UTM companies in general, whether it be OneSky or some other UTM out there. I'm really curious for you to expand on that so that the people watching today and that will watch this in the future can get a good feeling for that and understand what the value is that you're bringing to the UTM section of the industry.
Yeah, for sure. So 2 years ago, we couldn't even spell UTM. We'd never heard of a UTM. But in our conversations with drone makers, drone operators, it quickly became clear that this technology was going to be at the center of everything. OneSky is a perfect example of a technology that is putting itself as the hub for different jurisdictions around the world. By jurisdiction, it could be a city, it could be a state or a province, it could be even a country. And these UTM platforms are going to be the standard from which all operators get their information. So rather than focusing, excuse me, on delivering our data set into individual aircraft or individual operators one by one, we've realized that the UTM is actually the keystone for the whole infrastructure, the whole setup. Having that dependable terrain information at the UTM level, where it can be served out to all the drones flying in a certain jurisdiction, is the most efficient way to ensure broad safety and efficiency targets can be met. Really, the UTM is the driver of UAS in the future, and being partnered with OneSky is a great way for us to ensure that we're able to bring our expertise to bear on as many aircraft as possible.
Very cool. Thank you so much for that. We happen to agree with you, and the way you broke that down was very, very interesting. And I hope that we can expand on that in future conversations too. Yeah. I want to make sure we address this before we run out of time too, Fabio. We've talked a lot about certifications, what's certified, and so forth. Help us understand what it means when you say the data is EASA certified and what value that brings.
Yeah, I think that's a good and important question. And I mentioned it already a bit in the beginning, but the idea of this Type 1 certification, which is like similar to the FAA Type 1 certification, is really like it's certified with regular audits and with quite high requirements on the tool we are using, that whatever data we input into our system and we translate it to the requirements of our end user, we just have to make sure that really whatever we provide then to the end user is really exactly according to the requirement. And that's like the main thing about the certification. If we talk now about our terrain certification, where we have been like the first one doing it, actually one of the most important parts which we at Lufthansa Systems had to perform was like to do a completely independent validation of the data set. So Intermap was like producing the data according to our combined requirements, and we then really had to independently prove that the data fulfills the quality characteristics. And that's really then what we prove also with our certification. So whenever our customer orders our data, he can be assured that the data is as we state on our data sheet. So we can really make sure that the decors are fulfilled. And maybe just the important step in the end, I mean, there's this requirement for certification now in the traditional aviation industry. I think at the moment it's still a bit unclear how this requirement will be in this whole drone industry in the future. So do you need like EASA or FAA certified data or not? I think that's still not fully clear, but I think it's really still, even if it's like no requirement in the end, it still makes sense that you really use like certified data, that you use the same data as it's used in all the cockpit nowadays. It also helps like to start like to kick off the industry with like a positive image to really show that you take safety serious and that you just take like the best proven data on the market. So I think it's important to really also look into certified data in this industry.
Okay. Amanda, how are we doing on time so far?
We've got about 5 minutes left, so we probably need to jump to Q&A.
Okay. Are you seeing any questions coming through yet? I have a couple here that I would like to ask if we have the ability to go into those.
Yeah, why don't you go ahead and jump into your questions. Folks in the audience, if you have questions, now is the time to go ahead and submit those, and our panelists will be happy to answer those. You can either submit them through the chat or you can submit them through the questions panel, and we'll be happy to answer those. If we don't get to them during this session, we will reach out to you after the session and answer those questions. So we will make sure that everybody's questions get answered.
Thanks, Amanda. So Ivan and Fabio, either one of you guys want to jump in on this? When we hear global, a lot of times, I assume it means the world, right? But is NEXTView truly global, or is it most of the world, or how would you answer that?
You want to go for that, Fabio?
Oh, you asked me? Sorry. Yeah, I mean, as you produce the data, I thought you're more the expert, but no, generally speaking, it's really a global data. And if you look at SRTM, for example, it really has these big issues above the 60-degree north. And that's really something where we know it's many aircrafts actually flying above 60-degree north as well. And we know that this is actually an issue in the current data. So it was really important for us to make sure that it's a global coverage. Wherever you need the data around the world, it's included. And actually, it's not just the big land masses, it's also really important to include small features like islands, which are like next to continents, because you have often rescue helicopters flying like on the sea. And when like small islands are not included, that's also like a safety risk. So we really make sure that everything is included. Yes, so it's true global.
Yeah, you answered that better than I could have, Fabio.
I have a follow-on to that too. I think we have a couple minutes left. When it comes to geographic regions where I would expect this to have a high impact, right? It's thinking as a UTM guy now. When we start doing urban operations and there's buildings to worry about and you're flying at the lower altitudes, that's an obvious one, right? But from your experience to date, what geographic regions are you finding the most demand for your products?
Yeah, I'll take that one. So as I kind of mentioned, the rural delivery use case was kind of an early driver for our UAS UTM offering, but we are definitely seeing a switch. We're seeing a lot of demand in urban areas, especially in Europe, where air mobility is really kind of beginning to get a lot of traction and a lot of investment, both in the developers of the technology and also in the urban infrastructure that the cities are putting in place. The Olympics in Paris is kind of one example. We're also seeing a new demand that's sort of similar in the US to the delivery use case. We're starting to see sort of micro delivery regions around like universities or smaller cities, and that's going to be growing here really quickly. And then we're also starting to see a lot more interest in rural North America as state-level departments of transport begin to basically build out their regulatory and hardware infrastructure to handle this in the near future. It looks like state departments of transport are going to be more involved with UAS than you might have thought. So those are where we're seeing a lot of the interest these days.
Very cool. Okay, to wrap things up on from a question perspective, I'll more or less make a statement rather than pose this as a question. People might be wondering if we've already started working together and done any integrations, and the answer is yes. We have. OneSky has already utilized the NEXTView data sets and a couple of examples to provide value to customers when it comes to things like vertiport planning and route planning, as far as making sure they have good, safe corridors. And we're also now looking at how to utilize that data to do things like navigation analysis with building blockages from satellites and so forth. So I expect a lot more to come from that. And I look forward to sharing that with the community at large and trying to find new and more inventive ways to use our technologies together. So with that, Amanda, I believe we are out of time.
We are. That is all the time we have for today. So I'd like to thank you, Ivan, Fabio, and Mike. for joining us today. This was a fantastic coffee chat and an incredibly interesting topic for us this month. So thank you again. Thank you to everyone in the audience for joining us as well. We do have the contact information up on the screen. So if you would like to reach out to Mike, Ivan, or Fabio for any follow-up questions, they are available and willing to answer any and all of your questions. So thank you again. You will receive an email with the download so that you can rewatch this coffee chat if you would like to see it again, and will also be available on our YouTube channel in the next couple of days. So thank you, everyone. We'll see you soon.
Thanks, Amanda. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.